At 9:04 on a December morning, a Canadian city district ceased to exist in a fraction of a second. The fireball hit 5,000 degrees Celsius. The shockwave moved faster than a kilometre per second. Nothing within half a mile survived. This is the Halifax Explosion of December 6, 1917. The largest man-made blast on Earth until the atomic bomb. Nearly 2,000 people died. 9,000 more were injured, and the ship that caused it had been moving at walking speed, a one-knot collision, slower than a stroll. 20 minutes later, 2.9 kilotons of energy tore the harbour apart. The blast hurled the ship's anchor shaft 2.35 miles. People felt the ground shake 200 kilometres away. Here is the strangest part. Almost everyone in Halifax had 20 full minutes of warning, and most of them walked toward it. To understand why, you need to know what was hiding inside an ordinary-looking French freighter called the Mont-Blanc. Because the Mont-Blanc was not carrying flour or coal or soldiers, she was, by any honest measure, a floating bomb. And the story of how she ended up burning against a crowded pier begins with a war on the other side of the Atlantic. By 1917, the First World War had turned Halifax harbour into the main assembly point for convoys sailing to Britain and France. Merchant ships gathered in the sheltered inner harbour and sailed in convoys, carrying supplies across the Atlantic to the front. On December 5th, a French freighter arrived from New York and waited overnight outside the harbour. Her name was Mont-Blanc. Her cargo was 2,367 tons of picric acid, a high explosive packed into every hold. On top of that, 250 tons of TNT, 62 tons of gun cotton, and 246 tons of benzol fuel. Nearly 3,000 tons of explosives in total, with barrels of flammable benzol stacked right on the open deck. One spark on that deck, and there would be no fire brigade on Earth capable of stopping what came next. On the morning of December 6th, Mont-Blanc entered the Narrows, the tightest channel of the harbour, heading for the inner anchorage. Coming the other way was a Norwegian ship called Imo, empty, riding high in the water and running late. Imo was above the harbour speed limit and out of her lane. Two ships, one narrow channel, and minutes to disaster. The Imo had a reason to hurry. She had lost time loading coal, and her captain was trying to win it back. Entering the Narrows, she met an American steamer, the Clara, being piloted up the wrong side of the channel. Imo swung toward the Dartmouth shore to pass her. Then the tug Stella Maris appeared, pushing her even further off course. Now Imo was running down the wrong side of the Narrows, straight into the path of the floating bomb. Mont-Blanc's pilot signalled and swerved. Imo reversed her engines. It was exactly the right move, and it doomed them both. Empty ships sit high in the water. Reversing swung Imo's bow sideways. Her propeller's thrust turned her straight into Mont-Blanc. The impact, when it came, was almost gentle, about 1 knot, slower than a person walks. A dent, a scrape of steel. But the scrape struck sparks, and on deck the collision had cracked open the barrels of benzol, spilling fuel and vapour everywhere. The sparks found the vapour. Within moments, the front of the Mont-Blanc was burning, and the fire was growing out of control. Her crew did not reach for hoses. They knew the manifest. They ran for the lifeboats and started shouting. The clock read 8:45. The Mont-Blanc had roughly 20 minutes left to live. And so did much of Halifax. From 2 lifeboats, the French crew screamed warnings toward every vessel they passed. Over the noise of the harbour, nobody could hear them. The burning ship, abandoned, drifted with the current, gliding slowly toward the city until she beached herself at Pier 6 on Richmond Street. Richmond was a working neighbourhood: homes, schools, factories, docks, and a column of oily smoke was now rising right beside it. Are the good theories and the Shefame speaks in Traveredific rated the storatives? A burning ship is a spectacle. All over the North End, people gathered on the streets and pressed against their windows to watch. That is why the warning failed. Nobody saw a bomb. They saw a fire. Free theatre on a cold December morning. A few understood the danger. The tug Stella Maris steamed toward Pier 6 and turned her single fire hose on the inferno. When the hose proved useless, her captain and sailors from the warship Niobe tried to fix a line and tow the Mont-Blanc away. And in the railway telegraph office by the docks, a dispatcher named Vince Coleman was getting ready to run. Then he remembered the morning train, full of passengers, minutes from the waterfront. Coleman turned around and went back inside. His last message went down the wire: ammunition ship afire, making for Pier 6. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys. Coleman stayed at his key. At 9:04 and 35 seconds in the morning, the Mont-Blanc ceased to exist. The explosion reached 5,000 degrees Celsius, with pressures of thousands of atmospheres. For one instant, conditions no building could survive. The shockwave crossed the city faster than 1,000 meters per second, snapping trees, bending iron rails, and flattening homes like paper. Nearly everything within 800 meters was simply erased. Richmond, the neighborhood watching from its windows, was gone. The smoke column climbed almost 4 kilometers. The blast was felt in Prince Edward Island and on Cape Breton, 200 kilometers away. Then the sea answered. The blast raised a tsunami that surged 18 meters above the high water mark into the shoreline. The wave erased Tufts Cove, a Mi'kmaq community that had lived on that shore for generations. 1,782 people were confirmed dead. Around 9,000 were injured. 6,000 lost their homes entirely. And the windows took a terrible toll of their own. Hundreds of people had been watching the fire through glass. The shockwave turned every pane into shrapnel. Doctors performed 249 eye removals. 16 people were left with no eyes at all. Then, overnight, a blizzard buried the ruins under 16 inches of snow. Survivors were trapped. Help had to come from somewhere. It came from Boston. The Boston Red Cross and the Massachusetts Public Safety Committee sent doctors, nurses, and supplies north into the snow. Halifax never forgot it. In 1918, the city sent Boston a Christmas tree as thanks. The gesture was revived in 1971, and it never stopped. Boston's official Christmas tree still comes from Nova Scotia every year. The search for someone to blame took longer. An inquiry pointed at Mont-Blanc's captain, her pilot, and the harbour's naval commander. Courts disagreed. Canada's Supreme Court, then London's Privy Council, ruled both ships equally at fault. No one was ever convicted. Richmond was rebuilt in hydrostone, fireproof compressed cement block. 326 new homes, each facing a tree-lined boulevard, by March 1919. For 28 years, until Hiroshima, this remained the largest explosion humanity had ever produced. It began as a traffic accident. And 2 years later, another North American city was hit by a disaster nobody believed possible: a flood made of molasses. Next time.